Lorraine looked gloomy when we entered her office. "I have a preliminary report from a private investigator," she said. "Obviously, Caroline wasted no time. Last night, a man came to your house and stayed the night. We couldn't look inside." "I have cameras installed in the house," I said. "I can go replace the flash drives, and we can see what was in there." "Okay," she said. "Go ahead and do it now, and then we can make a plan. I assume that the information on these drives will be important." "There's an au pair there," I said. "I can't go back. I have to be away on business." Lorraine checked her phone. "The au pair is at the play center with Sophie and James," she said. "I'll keep an eye on her and let you know if she leaves there." My house was about 30 minutes from Lorraine's office, and Michelle was driving fast. We got there without incident, and I changed the flash drives. I quickly examined the house, but did not see anything untoward. We then went back to Lorraine's office and looked through the flash drives. I decided not to look at the one from the bedroom. I didn't want to see what was there. I knew which man he was talking about as soon as he walked through the door. As I suspected, this is her boss, the man for whom she worked the entire time we were together, Bill Wainwright. What almost killed me was what happened when he arrived at the house. First of all, he had his own key and entered himself. As he entered, James looked up and saw him. "Daddy Bill!" he exclaimed, and ran to hug him. This freed my hands. I broke down and cried. I couldn't watch anymore. Lorraine watched as I broke down. Michelle, for the first time ever, hugged me and held me while I cried. It took a while, but eventually I pulled myself together. "Would you like to rest a little?" Lorraine asked, and I shook my head. The pain subsided a little, but anger began to take over me again. "What's next?" I said. "I already have a copy of the terms and conditions of employment at your wife's company. There is no fraternization policy, so you have a claim against the company for violating it. Since the person with whom your wife is fraternizing is a top manager of the company will not be able to claim that it did not know about what was happening." We explained to Lorraine what the company lawyer had told me and what he had advised. She broke into a wide smile. She picked up the phone and called him, asking for copies of the prenuptial agreement, and he emailed them to her. "Just perfect," she said, reading the marriage contract. "Throw away everything I said before. Your boy's plan is absolutely correct. If your partner wants to get rid of the company, then buy him out. Put everything you have into a company, and it will immediately put it out of reach. We'll be able to sue her company for failing to comply with a court order, him for alienation of affection, her for making a false statement on her birth certificate, and both of them for money still spent on the children. The deductible for medical bills alone for childbirth is a significant amount." "It all depends on whether Robert wants to sell," I said. "I think we'll have to wait until he comes with an answer." Michelle drove me back to the hotel, and I went up to my room. I was about to sit on the bed when there was a knock on the door. I opened it and saw that she was standing in the corridor. "Let's go," she said. "You can't stay here." "What?" I asked. "Why?" "Because you can't be alone," she said. "You'll only be thinking or emptying the minibar. I want you where I can look after you." While she spoke, she gathered a few things. She took me by the arm and led me out of the room, then examined me and led me to her car. "Where are we going?" I asked, finding that I didn't care. "To my house," she said. "I have a free room that you can use." "But," I began. She turned her head and looked at me. I fell silent. I had never been to Michelle's house and was surprised to see that it was almost the same size as mine. Our house had 2 floors, while hers had only 1 floor. She led me into a room with a bathroom. "Take a shower and change," she ordered. "Dinner in 30 minutes. We ate dinner in silence. I guess it was delicious, but I didn't feel it. My mind was occupied with a whirlpool of thoughts that could not calm down. I was furious, but I couldn't find the strength to express it. I was devastated, but I couldn't find the strength to worry. All I had energy for now was implementing my plans. I was on autopilot, my destination set. I was just thinking about what to do after eating when the phone rang. I winced, hoping it wasn't Caroline. It wasn't Caroline. "Hello, Robert," I said languidly. "Why?" That's all he asked. Robert and I have been friends since university. We studied together, and it was the project we worked on together that gave us the basis for starting a business. At first, I would have gotten it about most of the company because I had more capital to invest than he did. "Caroline is cheating on me," I said in a wooden voice. "All the time." "All the time?" he said incredulously. "Do you mean—" "None of the children are mine," I told him. There was silence on the other end of the phone. "So you want to tie all your assets to the company and hide behind a prenuptial agreement?" he asked. Either Brian Spencer, our lawyer, explained everything, or he understood the partnership agreement much better than I did. "I want to keep 5%, he said, "and stay with the company as a consulting engineer. I will discuss the details with the HR department. The rest is yours." "Okay," I said. "I'll ask Brian to fill out the paperwork." "Gary," he said after a moment, "I'm really sorry. I know it doesn't feel that way to you now, but it will get easier later. I promise. I've been almost where you are now, and it's actually getting easier." Only then did I remember that, about 4 years ago, he got divorced. I didn't know the details because, despite the fact that we are friends, he is a very private person. I just knew it wasn't going to be very pleasant. That's why he remembered the marriage contract. He used it himself. The next morning, Michelle woke me up with a cup of coffee. "Let's go," she said. "We still have a lot to do." The first thing we did was go to Brian Spencer, the company's lawyer. He had already prepared all the paperwork for me to buy out Robert's share, and we completed the entire transaction in less than 30 minutes. I gave him everything I got from the house, from my savings, and from my 401k. I also had to take out a loan against the company pension plan for the remaining amount. Now, at least on paper, I'm about $1 million in debt. My salary was almost halved since payments were made before taxes. Then we went to Lorraine's. I showed her all the documents for the deal, and she was delighted. "Perfect," she said. "Today I will draw up the documents. We can submit them on Monday if you want. We will serve it to him, her, and company at the same time. Where do you want her to be served?" "Where it will be most awkward for her," I said. "If you could do it through a billboard at the Super Bowl, I'd gladly pay for it." Lorraine laughed. "We'll serve her in the office," she said, "on Monday, at 10 in the morning, provided that before this time the papers go through the court. If I submit them today, I should have them tomorrow afternoon." I nodded. "So what now?" I looked at Michelle. She ran things. "Now," she said, "we have 2 more stops before you go back to the office and act like you just got back from fighting a fire in Portland. Do you think you can hold out at home until Monday?" "I think I'll have to," I said. "No need to guess," she said. "Tell me what you need to help you hold out until that time." "I don't know," I said. "Any good news?" She smiled at me. "Then let's go," she said. I was surprised when we stopped at the medical center, where I had all my tests and where I had the procedure. That meant I would never become a father. "What are we doing here?" I asked. "Did you want good news?" she said. "Let's go." I followed her into the clinic and stood aside while she walked to the reception desk. The administrator nodded and motioned for us to sit down. We sat down. Less than 2 minutes later, my doctor came out and invited me into the consultation room. I looked at Michelle, who made no move to follow me. "Please?" I said, and she nodded and followed me. Dr. Harrington made no comment about my secretary's involvement in my consultation. He knew who she was and that she was not my wife, since he was both my doctor and Caroline's doctor. Why I asked my secretary to come with me was my business, not his. "Gary," he said, "I understand that you want to ask about vasectomy reversal." My eyes widened. "Is this even possible?" I looked at Michelle. There was a tiny smile on her face. "Yes, is this possible?" "Of course," said Dr. Harrington. "Since your vasectomy was performed 3 years ago, the success rate for reversal operations is about 95. The surgery takes a little longer than the initial one and involves general anesthesia. But I'm confident that once we're done, you'll be able to be a father again." And again my eyes filled with tears. "I still have a chance to become a father. This will require surgery, but it is a small price to pay if it means I can have children of my own." I had no idea who I would have children with, but at least it was possible. "I know this is very hard to take," said the doctor. "Here is information about the operation and its cost. Unfortunately, it will not be covered by your insurance. If you want to move forward, let me know and we can schedule you in for testing." "Thank you, doctor," Michelle said, standing up and taking the information from him. "We'll be in touch." I stood up too and let her lead me out of the clinic and towards her car. "Good enough news?" she asked, smiling softly at me. In an impulse, I hugged her and pressed her to me. "Thank you," I said, burying my face in her hair. Then I realized what I had done and instantly let her go and stepped back. "Sorry," I said. Gary," she said softly. "Everything is fine. We got into her car. One more stop, then back to the office," she said. "I visited Bill Wainwright's house several times during the years that Caroline worked for him. He and his wife Stephanie live in a nice area just outside the city. This is a gated community. They host some corporate events here." "For what?" I asked. Michelle simply got out of the car and walked to the door of the house. I followed her. She didn't even have to knock, Stephanie told the security guard, who led us into the grounds, that we were on our way, and she stood at the door waiting for us. "Gary," she said in greeting. "You must be Michelle, his secretary? Was it you who called?" "Yes, and it's me," Michelle answered. "Come on in," Stephanie said. She led us into an office-like room off the hallway. I've never been in this room. Judging by the photographs on the table and on the wall, this is Bill's office. But she sat down at the table and pointed to the chairs opposite. It seems she decided that the call was not personal. "How can I help you?" Stephanie asked, looking at me. I sat and looked at her, unable to speak. "Did you know?" I asked it finally. Stephania sighed sadly. "No," she said. I suspected it, but didn't know. I could never find any evidence, nothing that I could take to a lawyer, otherwise I would have taken the bastard for every penny he had. "Get in line," Michelle growled. "Do you have evidence?" Stephanie asked, and I nodded. "Evidence that none of my children are mine, that they have the same father. A video of him and Caroline in my house where my son calls him Pa." I couldn't finish the sentence. The lump threatened to suffocate me, and I was lost again. "Oh, Gary, I'm so sorry," she said. "I suspected for years that he and Caroline, but he was so careful. I followed him, checked his phone, email. I even challenged him, but he managed to convince me that I was just paranoid. The detectives I used found nothing. I swear that if I was sure, if I had proof, I would immediately come to you. But I couldn't ruin what looked like a happy marriage based on suspicion alone. I needed to be sure, and I couldn't get any proof." "What are you going to do?" I wondered if I should tell my enemy's wife about my plans. I wasn't sure that she wouldn't tell him everything as soon as he got home. It might be too late for him to do anything meaningful, but I wanted it to be as much of a shock to him as it was to me. "The question is, what are you going to do?" I answered. "Now you have proof." She smiled slightly at this. "I understand," she said. "And I don't blame you." I wouldn't say either. If you have the name of a good divorce lawyer, I would appreciate it. Michelle took a business card from her purse and handed it to her. "Thank you. Is a week enough?" I nodded. "Great," she said. "I'll contact—" She showed the card, "and coordinate with her." She stood up. Obviously, our meeting was over. Michelle and I stood up. Stephanie came over and gave me a quick hug and a peck on the cheek. "Again, I'm so sorry," she said. "Keep an eye on him," she said to Michelle, who flinched as she hugged me. "He deserves better than what that bitch did to him." We returned to the office, and I spent the rest of the day finishing up the things I had to do while I was in Portland. At the end of the day, I went home. At her usual time, Michelle knocked on my door, looked in, and said she was going home. She was back to being the professional she always was. This also left me feeling lost. I felt like I was starting to get a little closer to her, but that must have been just my imagination. I wished her good night, thanking her for her help. I worked late at the office and had a lot to catch up on. "What time will you be home?" A message came from Caroline around 8. "Maybe another hour or two. I need to catch up on some post-trip stuff. I'll probably already be asleep and get up early in the morning. Love you." Once again, I couldn't bring myself to respond to this message. I continued working until almost 11. I really wanted her to be asleep when I got home. The less I have to communicate with her, the better I will feel. When I returned home, the house was in darkness. Nothing seemed unusual. I stopped by to see Sonia and James. They were both asleep and looking as adorable as ever. I felt sobs forming in my chest, and I had to hide in the bathroom. I couldn't let Caroline catch me crying over children that weren't even mine. I still haven't decided what to do with them. It's unlikely that any of them will remember me if I just leave them. I have no responsibility to them. But I still love them both. How can I abandon them when less than 48 hours ago they were my children, my flesh and blood, my pride and joy? And now they are just more proof of my slut wife's infidelity. I decided to wait and see what happens next. In any case, the decision may not be made in my favor. I went to bed, doing my best not to wake Caroline. I didn't fall asleep right away, and when the alarm clock woke me up in the morning, Caroline had already left. When I entered the kitchen, the assistant was there feeding the children. I looked at her. She should have known. It's impossible that she doesn't know. Is she really still looking at me and laughing at the stupid lout who can't even satisfy his wife? Little did she know that the children were not even mine. Did she take the children to say goodnight to Papa Bill, as she often did with me? My mind was wondering, and I was imagining her and Caroline having a dirty threesome with Bill Wainwright while the kids cried in the next room. I shook my head angrily. She knew. I decided. And on Monday, I will take great pleasure in firing her. I will do everything to make sure that little bitch never works as an au pair again. I'll tell the agency that... Wait, what am I doing? I take my anger out on someone who has no hope of doing the right thing in this situation. You're damned if you do and damned if you don't. If she told me, she would lose her job. She could leave. I resoned, but then, it seems, she also had feelings for our children, whom she looked after even before Sonia was born. I'm angry, but maybe not the right person. I went to work. When I arrived, Michelle was already in the office. It was as if the previous few days had never happened. She was all business, although I noted in my planner that she had cleared my day for what she called marketing. I settled into my office and she brought me my morning coffee, as she had done every day for 9 years of working for me. Then she sat down on the other side of the table. Only then did I notice that she had brought coffee for herself. This is something she has never done before. Marketing, I asked. Since when have I been involved in marketing? She grinned. The grin was quite bitter, and somehow gave me a warm feeling inside. We need to make a plan, she said. The last part of Lorraine's strategy. I looked at her, not understanding. What? I said. Tell everyone, Michelle said. Her friends, family, church groups, volunteer groups, anyone and everyone she interacts with needs to know what a slut she is and what she did. It won't put me in a good light, I said. I'll become a laughingstock. A cuckold, not even able to satisfy his wife, raising other people's bastards. You have to tell your story, she said. If you don't do it, then Caroline will. And believe me, it will make you look much worse than playing an ignorant cuckold. What about an abusive husband, or someone who abuses their children? People will believe this crap, and when we nuke her, she'll respond with everything she's got. Speak up first, and people will be less likely to believe any counter-accusations. Some people, of course, will believe it, but there's nothing you can do about it. Michelle put together a media package containing all the evidence of Caroline's infidelity. There was a private investigator's report, copies of a DNA report showing that I was not the father of my 2 children. There were copies of videos taken in my house, including the one of James saying hello to Bill, and videos from the bedroom that I had not watched and did not want to watch. Later that morning, I received an email from Lorraine. Apparently, Stephanie gave her a sample of Bill's DNA. She checked it against the DNA test I received, and it turned out that he was definitely the father of both children. I paused. Children? I suddenly thought of them as my children. We included this new information in a package and prepared it for shipping. They will be sent to Caroline's parents, my parents, and Caroline's brother and sister, who I was very close to. Electronic copies will be sent to all her Facebook and LinkedIn contacts, as well as anyone else I can send them to. The ones addressed to our immediate family, I paid a courier company for delivery at 10 in the morning on Monday, which was the time the balloon was supposed to rise. I just need to get through the weekend. I had a plan to do this. Since I am an engineer, it took me less than an hour to design and build a small device. It had a motor, a timer, and a battery. I could set it up so that the motor would spin, creating a vibration after a certain amount of time. I returned home on Friday evening, and after the au pair left, I hid the device under Sophie's pillow. It was supposed to go off at 6 in the morning the next day, which is about the time we usually wake up. This would wake Sophie up and therefore eliminate our weekend morning sex. Everything worked perfectly. I was woken up by Sophie coming into our room and climbing into bed with us. Now there was no sex for us. I smiled to myself. I managed to keep myself busy for the entire Saturday, doing all the things Caroline had asked me to do for months. When she commented on this, I simply said that it was high time to do them, since she was bugging me for so long. On Saturday night, when, strangely enough, Caroline tried to instigate sex, I pretended to be asleep when she came out of the bathroom, and on Sunday her daughter came into our bedroom again, having been awakened from sleep by my device. On Sunday, we decided to go for a walk with the children and spent the whole day at the zoo. There were several times throughout the day when I looked at Caroline, the woman I loved, the woman I thought loved me, and the two children I was caring for, convinced they were mine, and almost broke down. I bit the inside of my cheek until it bled, trying to hold back my emotions. But I made it through the weekend. On Monday, I was excited. I told Caroline that I would work from home. I wanted to talk to the au pair. Caroline left for work at her usual time, poking her head into my office to tell me she was leaving. I pretended to be engrossed in email and just grunted in response. I heard her car drive out of the garage and the door closed. I looked at my watch. 8:15. The au pair knocked on my office door. She wanted to take the children to the play center, but I said no, they should stay at home. This surprised her. I had never refused her before, but she just nodded and returned to the children. I heard how upset James was that he couldn't go, but he really wanted to. A little after 9, Michelle arrived at the house. I was surprised, but I let her in. For the first time since I've known her, I made coffee for her. We had a conference call with Lorraine at 9:30. "Gary," Lorraine said, "this is your last chance to stop. I'm not saying you should, just pointing out that if you changed your mind over the weekend, now is the time to say so." "No," I said, without any doubts. "Then I'll see you on the other side," Lorraine said. "All is ready." I kept an eye on my email inbox, waiting for service confirmation emails to arrive. Exactly at 10 in the morning, the first came, the second 3 minutes later, and the third 5 minutes later. Then my phone rang. It wasn't Caroline as I thought, but my mother. "Gary," she began. "Hi, Mom," I said. "What's happening?" she asked. "Did you read the package I sent?" I asked. "Yes, but then you know as much as I do. Caroline cheated on me, probably my entire married life, with her boss. The children are not mine. I'm divorcing this bitch." "Gary can't—" "No, Mom. Listen, I have to go. I have other calls." I passed out. The phone immediately rang again. This time it was Caroline. "Gary?" I didn't answer, waiting for her to continue. "We need to talk," she continued. Still no answer. "I am going back home." She interrupted the call. "Caroline is on her way," I told Michelle. "I'll get out of your way," she said. I wanted to ask her to stay, but I didn't know how to do it. I just looked up at her. "Call me," she said, "when you find out what's going on." And she left. Caroline arrived home about 20 minutes later. I heard her car drive up to the house. She didn't even bother going into the garage. I didn't know what to expect when she walked into the house. I didn't know whether she would come in with a weapon in her hands or slip away with her tail between her legs. Anyway, she came into my office and sat down opposite me at the table. "Gary, she began. "Not interested," I said, interrupting her. "But—" "Not interested," I said. "You don't even want—" "No," I said. "I don't want to hear a single fucking word out of your mouth. For 9 fucking years, you lied to me. Neither child is mine, but you convinced me to get a vasectomy while you were still on the pill so you could keep having sex with Daddy Bill." Her eyes widened at this. "So, no, Caroline," I continued. "I'm not interested in what you have to say. The lawyer's business card is in the package you received when you were served. If you have something you think I should know, talk to her." "What about the children?" she asked. "What children?" I answered. "I don't have children, and if it were up to you, I would never have them. I would ask why you did this to me, but I don't want to hear another lie. I'm not interested in your excuses, justifications, or reasons. I just want this to end so I can pick up what's left of my life and move on." I called the au pair into the room. I knew that she heard me, since the door of my office was open, and she was only in the next room. "You're fired," I said. "Right now. Get your shit together and fuck off." "What?" she said. "Why?" "Because you covered for her," I said, pointing at Caroline. "Knew she was having sex with her boss. I don't know if you knew the kids were his and not me, but you definitely knew what was going on. I have video evidence of you talking to Bill about children. Get out." "Gary," Caroline said, "you can't fire her. I pay her salary." The au pair looked at Caroline with a look of gratitude in her eyes. "Okay," I said. "I have already contacted the agency and informed them that you were complicit in an extramarital affair and agreed not to take any action against your company if they deregistered you. So if Caroline wants to keep you, she will not only have to pay you, but also take care of everything else, like taxes, vacations, pension, sickness, not to mention insurance." The au pair's face lost color. Not only did she lose her job, but she was removed from the agency's books. This would make it almost impossible for her to find other domestic work. Agencies exchanged information with each other. "Now get out," I said, and she ran away. "Did you have to do this?" Caroline asked. "She shouldn't have." "You started talking again," I said. "I told you I don't want to hear it. What I want is for you to take your things, take your children, and get out of my house." "This is my home too," she said. "According to the documents, no," I said. "It is registered only in my name. So until the courts decide otherwise, get the hell out." She jumped slightly when I screamed. James entered the room. "Mommy," he said. Sonia fell there. Caroline, with a stunned expression on her face and tears running down her cheeks, stood up and walked towards her daughter. I closed my office door and stayed inside while she packed her things. A few minutes later, she returned, holding Sonia in her arms. "Aren't you going to say goodbye to Sonia?" "Don't tell me," I said. "She is not my daughter, and he is not my son." "Take them to Daddy Bill and let him take care of his offspring. They don't concern me." "Gary, Get out!" I heard the front door close, and a few minutes later, her car started. She is gone. I let out the air I had been holding for what seemed like an eternity. I was shattered. I didn't hear the door open, and I jumped when a pair of arms wrapped around me and I fell with my head in my hands. I looked up and saw Michelle hugging me. She pulled me to her and held me while I sobbed. It took me a while to pull myself together again. I just threw away 9 years. My marriage, my children, my life are gone. I really didn't want to look at the world anymore. And again, Michelle took everything into her own hands. "Let's go," she said. "Lorraine said it would take Caroline about 4 hours to get an emergency warrant to occupy the house. Because she has children, and this is a matrimonial home. She will be back. Do you really want to give her the pleasure of kicking you out of your own home? We collected some of my clothes and all the important documents. I needed to figure out where to stay. but I loaded both my car and Michaela's car with my things and left. We first went to the office where I was serviced later that day. Lorraine called me to wait for the presentation. Not only was there an occupation order on the house, but there was also a restraining order, meaning I was prohibited from going within 100 meters of the house. If I want to pick up anything, I will have to make an appointment and be accompanied by Caroline's lawyer at my expense. Not understanding how this happened, I discovered that I had moved into Michelle's spare room. All my clothes are in my closet, and all my papers are now neatly stacked in the office cabinets. A week has passed since Caroline submitted her documents. I would work and then go back with Michelle to her house to eat and then sleep. In the morning, she brought me coffee, cooked breakfast, and then we went to the office together. It seemed like nothing had changed between us. She was still all business, and other than a hug when I crashed at home on the first day, I never smiled at her. And it's not like I had anything to smile about. On Monday morning, we had an appointment with the lawyers for the company Caroline and Bill worked for. I didn't know the details, but apparently we filed a claim for an amount that the company couldn't afford. They have insurance, but the maximum amount was $1 million, and we filed a claim for an amount significantly higher than that. Their lawyers were businesslike. Lorraine, my lawyer, grinned like a Cheshire cat. "What needs to be done?" the lawyer asked. "For you to agree to this?" "Immediate and comprehensive dismissal and forfeiture of the senior member's pension," Lorraine replied, "and an obligation to keep Caroline on staff for at least 3 years and $1,500,000. I wasn't really listening as they exchanged words. In the end, they agreed to all of the above, but I would only get $750,000. This will, at a minimum, pay off some of the debt I had to the company's pension fund. "It will all be paid when the divorce is finalized," Lorraine said. They nodded, understanding everything. Lorraine stayed with us at the next meeting. It was a meeting with Bill Wainwright's lawyers. I left their office $500,000 richer. I now have enough money to pay off my pension fund loan in full and still have a small amount left on hand. Or it will be like this after the divorce. My last meeting of the day was with Caroline's lawyers. Caroline was in the office with them, but she didn't look at me when I entered. Michelle was with me, as was Lorraine. "This accounting in the divorce petition is ridiculous," Caroline's lawyer began. "Your client is the main shareholder and CEO of a company that, according to recent estimates, is worth about $20 million, not to mention the assets in the house, savings, and 401. I suggest—" "Let me stop you there," Lorraine said, taking a sheaf of papers from her briefcase. "According to the prenuptial agreement signed by all parties, the company is not subject to division in the event of a divorce. My client recently made a significant additional investment in a company that took most of his savings, his entire 401k, and his home equity loan. He also had to take out a loan from the company's pension fund. One of the partners wanted to get rid of the company, and it was important that the shares did not fall into the hands of a competitor who had been trying to take over the business for several years. Because the pension fund loan means he is now on a reduced salary. He is now being paid less than your client, and I will be asking the court for some kind of maintenance agreement to help him tide him over while he finds himself." "What about the children?" her lawyer asked. "There is DNA evidence that these children are not his," Lorraine said, "that she deliberately falsified birth records to name my client as the father with the intent to defraud. In addition, and this is a separate issue, we are seeking to recover damages for serious injury when she knowingly persuaded him to undergo surgical sterilization, which he agreed to under the belief that he was the father of the children. The alternative is for your client to sign the divorce as is, pack up her belongings, and leave the marital home in his hands. She would receive half of the joint account, which currently had a balance of $9,443.15. The lawyer looked at the papers, at the marriage contract, and then at Caroline. For the first time, she looked at me. "Gary, please," she said. 9 years, I answered. 9 fucking years. You lied to me for 9 years, day after day. You have nothing to tell me that I want to hear." Caroline looked at her lawyer and nodded. She signed the papers. When she left the house, I was not there. I just received a letter from her lawyers saying that the restraining order had been lifted and the house was now mine. I can return to it at any time. I thought about it, but decided against it. Instead, I put the house on the market. It didn't quite match the amount I owed the bank, but I made up the difference, and the bank walked away, happy. 2 months passed, and I was still living in Michelle's spare room. After our divorce, Caroline moved in with her parents. Despite all the evidence I provided, they were firmly on her side and would not talk to me. It wasn't a loss for me. For some reason, Stephanie did not divorce Bill as she promised. I didn't know why, and I didn't want to find out. Because he lost his corporate job and pension, they had to sell their house in the gated community and move into a small apartment. Bill still has connections and skills in the market, so he was able to find a reasonable job and earn a living, although not as much as before. I didn't know she and Caroline were still dating. I hadn't seen her since that day at her lawyer's office, and I wasn't interested in it. I was sitting at my desk at work when Michelle knocked and entered the room without waiting for an answer. "Bill Wainwright is dead," she said without preamble. "What?" I asked. "How?" "Apparently Stephanie caught him with Caroline again," she said, "and shot him." I leaned back in my chair, a wide grin appearing on my face. I tried to erase it, but I couldn't. "That's where he belongs," I finally said. Michelle laughed. "I'm angry?" I asked her. "Because I'm happy about this?" "Not at all," Michelle said. "This bastard got what he deserved. By the way, this just arrived." She placed an official envelope on my desk. I looked at him in awe. We both knew what was there. I took it and opened it. "That's all," I said. "Finally, I am free." "Finally," Michelle said. Then she did the last thing I expected. She kissed me. It wasn't a peck on the cheek or even on the lips. It was a full-fledged kiss. With tongue, with lips, squeezing your toes. When she finally released me, I sat back in my chair, lifeless, dazed, and as solid as the mainmast of a T-clipper. She giggled, looking down and seeing my obvious excitement. "For 9 years," she said, "I took care of you. You are the most perfect man I have ever met. You never even looked at me the wrong way, stared at my legs or ass, or groped me. And that's why I loved you. I've been waiting for you for 9 years, and now you are free. I know that you have always respected me, and this is also a kind of love. We are a great team. I know you as well as any wife knows her husband, and if you think about it, you know me just as well. Give me a chance to show you that not all women are lying, cheating, treacherous bitches. Please." I was stunned. I remembered all the time I spent with her before I found out about the affair. I thought about how I felt about her. I vehemently defended her against my business partner to the point where he was kicked out of the business. At that moment, I realized that I had and still have real feelings for Michelle. I realized that it was impossible to work closely with someone for so long and not develop something. While I was with Caroline, there was no need to explore these feelings, to evaluate them, but now there is definitely such a need. "Will you say something?" she asked. There was an expression of concern on her face. This was the first time I saw her unsure. "How many?" I asked. She looked puzzled. "How much of what?" she asked. "Children," I said. "How many children will we have?" Subscribe to our channel so that your second chaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.